Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of Dylan Box. We haven't been with you in a while, so we're glad to be back. My name's Ryan,
Now, I'm Chris.
and we are here to talk about all things Bob Dylan. He actually celebrated his 83rd birthday recently,
Yeah.
so we're very excited to show you some things that we have been listening to recently. One thing that I was thinking about the other day was let's go back and see what we can find that's in the bootleg series, because there are a lot of interesting scraps that might have come from studio sessions, but this one in particular is very special.
Reach in the box, or
Yes.
even behind the
Well,
box.
it's so large that
Yes.
we have here Bob Dylan and the band, the Basement Tapes Raw. This is bootleg series volume 11. This is the vinyl edition, which I believe is 5 LPs. It doesn't have everything. If you get the CDs, you're going to get pretty much everything.
Yeah, I was going to actually bring that along, but we'll cover the basics from here. Talk about a seminal period of time. This is the spot. This is the album that documents.
Absolutely. So maybe we could talk a little bit about how this came to be.
Huh.
Dylan was on a very long tour with the band. He was doing a set of acoustic music. Then he'd come out with electric music with the band, of course. And I believe that kind of tour just ran him out ragged because he was getting a lot of flack in the press. He was getting the fans calling him Judas, or in one case, I think he was tired,
Yeah.
and he just wanted something different. So he moved with his family to upstate New York, Woodstock. He had a motorcycle accident, which to this day is people speculate about it, whether it was either a real thing or it wasn't as much of an accident as it was. Either way, it allowed Dylan some time to relax, regroup, find himself, and then get back to recording music. And this was done in 67, which is interesting because if you look at what was being done in 67, it was far from this, right?
It is, and I think part of the surprise in that it was recorded so early is that it was released officially as an album much later in the sequence. So when the Basement Tapes come out, I don't know if folks really could appreciate. It's not contrary. It was sort of contrary to the music of the time. This was, but not for Dylan.
And just listening to it now, obviously some of it was in the basement of the house where the band lived, which is called Big Pink.
Yeah.
Some of it was done in Dylan's living room or in his basement, I guess. Either way, it was all done on tapes. Some of those were released, but also I think the intention was they were cutting some songs for people to cover. So they wanted to license songs, and a lot of these songs did end up getting covered and done by other artists, with the originals not really being heard for many years. Right.
Right. Yeah. So if you heard the Mighty Quinn or something, you maybe wouldn't even know that it was a Dylan song.
Yeah.
Even with the Beatles, the early incarnation of the Beatles, there's notion that they could be, we're going to be songwriters, and we'll sell our songs to other people, and we'll be known as these songwriters, not even anticipating the impact that the Beatles were going to have. Well, Dylan always considered himself a song and dance man or
Yes.
whatever. So the notion of you could be writing some songs that other people cover, that happened very early. There's Peter, Paul, and Mary, and there's people who would just do it because it's Dylan and it's good for their bank account.
Yeah.
But Dylan was already selling a lot of songs, so this wouldn't be unusual.
Yeah.
He had taken this break.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the motorcycle thing, he might have just tripped over his son's trike or
Sure.
something.
Yeah.
Called
The
down
front
a
lawn and scraped up his shin.
Little bump on his
Yeah.
head. Like buying that time, if you go back to, I guess No Direction Home,
Yeah.
and you could see it building up.
Mm-hmm.
The Pennebaker was really good at kind of capturing these kind of signifying moments where Dylan just starts to seem tired, and
Very much.
and he's sort of exasperated. My favorite part of that film is when he's going back in England, and he already has this electric stuff happening in the States, but he goes back to do one more acoustic
Right.
piece, and he's just talking to these two teenage girls, and he's going through line. Oh, will we like your old stuff, and he's kind of trying to reason. Well, would you like me? you'd want me to enjoy my music.
Right.
You'd want me to be
Yeah.
happy too.
Yeah.
And they go, oh yeah, we do. And you just see he's like trying to convince anyone, even
Yes.
these teenagers, that he'd have to move on. And in doing so and getting, so much flack with his electric stuff, the band didn't want, especially Levon Helms, to get me out of here.
Right. Which he isn't on a lot of this. I didn't
Right.
know, but like
Yeah.
he's not on the whole thing.
Yeah,
It's
he
like,
shows up
you
a
know.
little bit later,
Right.
partially because it goes, is that Dylan? Check me out. I'll be
Exactly.
someplace else. But the band enjoyed Dylan and respected his artistry, but they were put through hell in this tour, and everyone booing him. He said they all got tired of being booed.
Yeah. Being confrontational either. I think it was, like other artists like an Iggy Pop or Jim Morrison where they were like very confrontational. I
Yeah.
think with Dylan's, he just realized it was the next phase in his art. And,
Yeah.
and the electric phase was the first major change for him.
Yeah.
And then they came this, right?
So so they're yelling out Judas, and I don't believe you. He could just start yelling at him. Oh, come up here and say that to me. And Dylan's about this
I'm going to
big.
fight you.
Yeah, I'm gonna fight you. I'll hit you with my guitar.
Yeah.
But no, he just says, I don't believe you, which is it's an interesting statement
It
because
is.
again, it's like him talking to the teenagers. It's like, don't you want me to be happy?
Right.
I think it's as simple
Don't
as
you
that.
want me to evolve?
Don't you?
Right.
Aren't you looking at my best interest too?
Yes.
And what happens here, I think, is about all of their own best interests moving forward. What struck you when you first were hearing this music?
And, but aside from the covers, because there's, they do some like Johnny Cash, Hank Williams, they do some cover songs.
Yeah.
Aside from those, the originals, they sounded very like thrown together.
Yeah.
But very like and they literally were. Like if you go, like Dylan was actually writing the songs on a typewriter before they even did them.
Yeah.
There's a song on here, I'm Not There, which has been lost for a long time, and it finally came back on this set, where it completely seems almost improvised, or
Yeah.
like he just wrote the lyrics like right before they started recording.
So I know the girl Marcus loves that song.
Yeah, right.
And so even when I bought the CD version of it, part of the reason for that was I just wanted to make sure that whatever was out there in the basement, I wanted to at least have heard it.
Yeah,
And there is something free and open about that music, that it could be totally improvised and yet find its own rhythm. And so I think that's in hearing the broad range of things that happen there, you get a lot of seeds
right.
of what was gonna, where they all were headed as the band
Yes.
moving forward, and then Dylan moving.
When they play a lot of these songs, they come together so organically, where he'll start or one instrument, and then they just kind of come together.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they jump in, and it's not like we hear them rehearsing, essentially. So
Yeah.
a lot of these songs, it's their interpretation of the song. But then with the original, a lot of the originals are very funny, or they're just silly, and you can tell they're having a lot of fun.
Right.
And they're really just getting back to basics, and then, like you said, laying the groundwork for other things that other people started to hear.
Yeah.
So, you had like Eric Clapton, for example, heard the first band album, probably heard some of these songs, and he just said, I don't know what Cream has done. I'm disbanding Cream, we're getting back to other things.
Right.
George Harrison, same thing. He heard certain aspects of this music in the band's first album and decided, we need to get back to basics
Right.
with what we're doing. It changed a lot of people at the time after they heard this music in that first band album.
And you're kind of the end days of the Beatles, but it talks about Harrison, going to see Clapton playing with Delaney and Bonnie Brown.
Right.
And I never knew that Harrison joined the band and played with them at shows in England.
I didn't, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, but it was all based on the same thing. It was,
Right.
I saw the band. Delaney seems like he's like trying to go from this old school feel.
Right.
I want to play on something like that
Uh-huh.
because they promised him, you can be in the back, being the second guitarist,
Yeah.
and just have fun playing music.
Mhm.
So the appeal to that for Clapton, the appeal to that for Harrison, was also this sort of freeing element. how did that strike you when you were hearing, the cheese and the chunk?
Yeah,
And
I'm like, this isn't like it's a far cry from like the abstract stuff he was doing with
Right.
like Blonde on Blonde,
Right.
And the tour, it's like now we're in a whole other territory. No longer are we doing the protest songs. We're not doing the poetry of all the other albums that came before this. Yeah, now it's like it's just a lot of wordplay. It's Dylan just off the top of his head, and then everybody else is finding it hilarious. And I think that made him want to do more.
Yeah.
Because they did over 100 songs that they recorded, and it's like if anyone did that, that would just be their career maybe.
Oh, sure.
This is like a summer, this is 6 months.
Yeah, they just crank these things out. One
Yeah.
of the things that when I first bought the basement tapes, the 2 CD thing, I was really kind of clueless about the history of
Yeah.
it. And Greil Marcus writes a great
Yes.
uh,
He has
essay.
a whole book on it.
Yeah,
too,
it's a
I
whole
think.
book.
Yeah.
He loves the basement
Yes,
tapes.
Yes.
And at the beginning, you would just, maybe the first time going through, you read the thing and then you hear these songs, and there are these very raggedy
Yes.
pieces, and you're thinking, maybe Greil Marcus is a little goofy, and just even Dylan will say that about
Yeah.
him. He goes, he makes too much.
Yeah. Out of this.
But I sound more like Howard Cosell.
Yeah.
Look at him.
Hey,
He hates him.
look at what he did next.
A second time that I heard it, and then I was starting to think, well, is this a band song?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a Dylan song? Did he write all these songs?
Yeah.
And it's a little fuzzy. You looking through it, you just see that it was so impromptu that Dylan ends up getting the credit, for most of these songs. But by the time you get to the first, band album, Big Pink, it's Wheels on Fire. I mean, it
Tears of Rage.
saturates,
Yeah.
it saturates them so much that it, you're essentially doing just kind of a jam. Let's
Yeah.
just throw things together, and then it solidifies the roadmap for a very creative band unto themselves.
Uh-huh.
It's like they would have been great without Dylan, but not that great.
I don't think so either. Yeah, I think he was the spark for them, and interesting how their music formed into this like Americana.
Right.
And except for Levon Helm, they were all from Canada,
Right.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And they kind of evolved into this. They were this kind of road band that toured with this front man, and they were called the Hawks, right?
Yeah.
Ronnie Hawkins
Ronnie
and the
Hawkins,
Hawks,
yeah.
and then they became Dylan's backing band, and then they just became like this country rock, like Americana, with the first couple albums that a lot of bands point to today. And so that was when I heard that. That's all I needed to hear.
Yeah, thanks. But to get this album is to sort of hear the influence on some of the most influential albums ever made.
Right.
And you'll hear these songs. You'll hear Tears of Rage. You'll hear what those were, and realize how the voice that Dylan adopts there is. He's not selling anything yet.
No.
If he's doing his country album, he takes on a voice, so
Very
he can sing
different
"Lay
voice.
Lady Lay."
Yeah.
He always says that he stopped smoking, and that's why
Yeah.
he is experimenting with that sound here, and so anyone who loves all this other stuff that came from that,
Yeah.
it's wonderful to dip your toe into this very eclectic. Moving music. There's some things that are very emotional.
Yes.
There's some completely silly silliness, but song per song, I could kind of feel the energy that they had.
Right.
And then you wonder, well, why didn't they turn this thing out? Well, it was never meant to be.
Yeah.
It was-
What did he do after this? He left the band. He went to, I think, Nashville and recorded John Wesley Harding,
Yeah.
which features none of these songs. Like,
Right.
they're all brand new songs
Yeah.
that weren't even rehearsed ahead of time. So, I mean, and he did all that within like the space of a year, I think. So, I mean, it just shows the genius of Dylan, but it's also like he just kind of reworked himself, and then he was never the same after this, right?
It's like the freedom
Yeah.
It's like the Freedom album or something else disconnected from the commerce of music. And certainly he was already very successful.
Absolutely.
And a very ambitious person who wants to have hit songs. He wants to be in the public eye. And then those things happen. He goes, I don't want to be in the public eye.
Right.
You know, just, I'm not some writer for anybody's generation. I'm a song and dance man. The person that he was trying to discover in himself. Who am I as a songwriter? What's the subject matter? Well, the subject matter is as broad as all this country, and this is what the real great, Greil Marcus books about him kind of look at that old weird America.
Yeah.
That, it's put in Marcus's language, but if you read that as a side commentary to this, you get sort of Marcus's view of the impact of this music, but if you want to go to the source,
Yes.
the source of this is what he's experimenting with and seeking out
Yeah.
in a song. And you would think, the first time you hear it, you would think that these are just old covers, all of them.
Yeah. I think maybe less than 10 years ago, there was a group that came together and they took some of the other Basement songs and they wrote new songs,
Oh, yeah.
like based on some of the lyrics. Because
Lyrics
they
from
keep
that.
finding things. A lot of these were just sitting around in Garth Hudson's like possession, and they were on like literally on the tapes because he was the one operating the tape deck.
Tape recorder, yeah.
So like luckily he saved everything, and they were able to capture these tapes and save them, and then give us. And they sound good. I mean, they don't sound like it's just a microphone stuck, in the back of an amp or something, and just capturing. It's like you feel like you're right there in the room with them.
Yeah.
Watching what's going on, and it's interesting to read like who's playing what instrument and who's doing what. I always like how they give you like the books with all the pictures, and I love this picture too, where it's just kind of
No,
the
really.
sun and you don't see his face, and,
Blotted out.
right? And so, but you get like a pretty comprehensive background on all the songs and who plays what, and just some commentary on what they are, and a lot of it talks about like what you're saying is that these songs are more rootsy than the stuff he was playing when he first started.
It's a great
Oh, yeah.
picture in the front there.
Yeah. Oh, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how he looked, and it's different if you watch the documentary and he was touring. I mean, yeah, he's no longer tired. He looks a lot different. Like he
Yeah.
definitely put on some weight. Looks healthier.
Yeah.
He has a family. He kind of get up in the morning and have his coffee, and then the band would come over and they get to work. So it wasn't anything that was rushed or.
That's a good picture of the band
Yeah.
there too. So here's
So-
they're out in front of
Yeah.
Big Pink there.
And you could Big Pink is still there, and it's actually an Airbnb. You could stay there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think for $600 a night. But
Oh.
and it's so crazy to me too. Again, like when he did this, there was like the world outside of where he was at. It was war protests. People were singing about peace and love.
Right.
Some of the greatest like debut albums or just albums in general came out the same year. Jimi Hendrix did the Sgt. Pepper. You had the Summer of Love. Everything was happening, and yet he was making something that went completely the opposite direction. That acted as if none of those things even mattered or were happening, right? And luckily we still have them today. They're preserved like all of the other, bootleg series. They're all preserved.
Yeah,
They're just as good as the albums, right?
Some folks get maybe tired of reissues of stuff or recombinations of stuff, but
This doesn't get old.
yeah, it doesn't get old. And wait 20 years when those aren't in print anymore, and they want $4 billion for for the vinyl version of this, when really you just want to hear the song. I mean, if you listen to it
Yeah.
and you're a fan of anything from that era, this will grow in importance over time.
Definitely.
But it's sort of reorienting yourself to kind of core musical value.
Right. And I mean, think about like this is probably like the first think about all the alternative bands that we've had, but this is probably like the first lo-fi type of record, where like how many bands said like all I need is a 4-track
Right.
and a mic, and it's the basic setup wherever in the house I can get it, and
Yeah.
I can make my own music.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. They didn't have a studio. It was really like literally the reel-to-reel recorder with the microphone set up, and then you think about all the other music that came after this, because the 70s, of course, had a lot of like the studio trickery, and you had albums that cost thousands of dollars to make.
Right.
Then you have something like this where people today still look at it and said, I don't need all that. I can do this on my own.
I had a wonderful class in a Valley College, and it was
Yeah.
like a history of art.
Oh, yeah.
And Mr. Fox, he would just put things, this is painting. He said, "This is why it's beautiful. It's beautiful as this," and then he would go backwards. But this was influenced by this. And
Yeah.
This is the cave painting where
It's all
they-
related.
Yeah, this cave painting where they figured out where to put a floor line, so that there was gravity to the thing. It wasn't just floating in space. And he sees the same beauty
Yeah.
in this ground line or in these cave paintings. It's the most intricate Michelangelo.
Yeah.
So they're all cut from the same cloth.
Absolutely. This owes a debt to everything, and it borrows from everybody. So it shows you that that's kind of like nothing is done in isolation. Nothing is truly as original as we think it is. It's kind of funneled through whatever artist at the time is interpreting that song. In this case, it's a couple artists, 5 or 6 people doing this stuff. And this is kind of where it starts for a lot of people, too.
Yeah. So we would probably give this at least a thumbs up. I think.
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
feeling it.
5 stars. And this is a good Dylan birthday pick. So
Yeah.
recent, 83rd birthday. If someone were to say, give me some Dylan that I haven't really heard of, that's not on the regular album, I would definitely point him in this direction too. This out. Please pick a copy of this up. If you're not going to buy the vinyl, you can stream it or you can pick up the CD. It's great for a road trip. It's also good if you're just sitting at home, on a Friday night and you want something different. So we will see you again very soon on Dylan Box. I'm Ryan,
And I'm Chris.
and thank you so much. See you soon.